All right, so this week I want to talk to everybody about something that I think we all do and not realize we're doing it at the time. And there's a couple different ways you can play Hearthstone or any other card game, right? You can play to win or you can play not to lose. And I think usually when you start to pick up a deck or whatnot, you try to play to win. But then as you start playing matchups and you start understanding how you lose to a deck, you start sometimes playing not to lose. And that is not a winning strategy, clearly by definition, right? So, a good example is, let's say you're playing an aggro deck against Control Priest, and you know that they're going to come at you with clears, but you need to beat them before they, have enough time to get to their clears and do their things and gain health, million health a turn and whatnot. So you should be probably, and this is as always with any of these topics, it always is this depends, right? The situation depends, but you should be out there trying to maximize the damage you can do early in the game, flood the board, hit him in the face, make it so they can't do things make it so that way they can't develop their game plan ideally, and you are making them react to you. But what will happen is you start playing against, and it could be like any deck, but you start playing against these decks, and it's like, well, they're gonna clear it, so I should hold a couple of these cards back, right? And I should save this for removal instead. Like, so you got the Death Knight card, right? I should know this guy play it all the time, but you get that Death Knight card that's 1 mana, summon 2 ants or 2 corpses, and you deal 4 damage to an enemy. And if you're playing an aggressive deck, if you're playing triple unholy, you want to get those ants on the ground and punching your opponent in the face. But a lot of times what'll happen is, like, if you start losing to a deck and you're like, "Oh, I know they probably on turn 3 they're gonna play that 4 health card, and if I can hold this, then maybe I can kill it, and then I will be okay," or whatnot. And it's a tough mentality to get into, and it's a tough mentality to realize you're even in and get out. So if you are playing an unfavorable matchup, right, you want to try to find your advantages. And you have to remember that you're going to lose 70% of the time, but that means you do win 3 out of 10 games in theory, statistically. So, uh, and there's always variance. Anytime we use stats, remember there's variance. You get some variance points when you get some positive points. The more you play the decks, the more you understand the matchups, you lose some of those points if you have no idea how to play that deck, that style of deck, whatever. So it's an average. And knowing the matchups is a big contributor to this, and it should help you contribute to how do you win this game. You're like, well, I know Priest is going to clear everything, so I'm going to try to get them before they can do it. Because right now, if you don't kill Control Priest in like 1 turn, they heal back up to full. And I've seen it happen multiple times where it's like I've gotten down to 4 health, 3 health, 2 health, sometimes 1 health, and it doesn't matter, right? Because unless you are able to finish the job, it feels like they always heal up to full. And you always remember that because that's the feeling that, you know, it's like, "Oh, I had them, and then they got there." But what you tend to forget are the games that you ran out 7 minions, you buffed them, you punched them in the face by turn 5, they couldn't handle it, and you moved on to the next game because that didn't have that much of an impact on you at the time, right? Because you're just like, "Alright, yeah, I just wanna move on to the next game." Nothing exciting happened, nothing noteworthy happened, but when you get that moment that you were just that close and they healed, that sticks with you more. So then you start thinking about this as you're playing, right? So you start saying, "Oh, you know what? I maybe I should do this a little differently because then I can do." But your best chance to win that game is to get them dead by turn 5, turn 6, turn 4, whatever it might be, and do it as quickly as possible. Keep them on the back foot. But it's so easy to kind of get in that mode of, oh, well, I know they have the clear. So instead of playing all my minions, I need to save a few. And this is just one particular example, right? There are lots of examples where you start to know the matchups and you know that. And I'm not saying that you should always, this is not to say you shouldn't plan for what your opponent does because that's hugely important. But what my point on this is if your game plan is this is how I win with this deck, and you start to deviate from that game plan because you are getting more worried about not losing than you are about winning, that probably doesn't work out in your favor. And the worst thing that can happen is it works, right? So you get out there, you save your card or your cards, or you don't go full board, and they clear, and you follow it up with minions, and you're like, okay, now they're going to clear it again, and they don't, and you win. Then that kind of positively reinforces that, right? And again, I'm not saying throw all your resources out, shoot to the wind. I'm saying know how your deck is supposed to win and try to play to that, while also considering what your opponent's going to do. Sometimes you need to trade, sometimes you need to go face all the normal Hearthstone strategy, but it's just having that mental attitude of, am I playing to win or am I playing not to lose? If you're playing not to lose, you're going to miss more opportunities for lethal. You're going to um, feel bad. You're going to feel if you go all in and you say, hey, you know what, it's a 30% matchup or 40% matchup. I know I need to punch them in the face, right? I need to get out there and I need to kill them. But you don't, you're gonna like, oh, whatever, you move on to the next game, and then you do and you win, whatever. But when you start like saying, oh, I know they're gonna have this card, and they have the card, they have that clear, and you're like, oh, of course they did. And then you start kind of having that mental attitude. You see a priest again, and then it's just like, oh, what do I even bother? Why do I even, what am I even gonna do here that's going to be different? Because I know that my game plan, I'm gonna play some minions and they're gonna clear it. But then you start to deviate from that game plan. And they still need to have those cards, and they still need to have the mana to play those cards and whatnot. So you want to really kind of, as you're going, and knowing matchups is something that, is a bit more of an advanced topic. But I'm assuming that if you are listening to this particular podcast, you are one of the dozens of people listening to this podcast, that you are a highly engaged Hearthstone player. So understanding matchups and learning matchups is not new to you, right? So you may have to adjust your plan, and your game plan on winning might differ versus the type of deck you're playing. You might say, I know, and I'm making stuff up, right? But you may say, I know I win this game if I force my opponent to play their confront the Tolvirs, and then I flood the board and punch them in the face, right? So you know what your game plan is, and you do that. And that doesn't mean you can't shift from your game plan if you see opportunities to win. But if your opportunity to win is, I'm going to play a bunch of cards and I'm going to punch them in the face and beat them before they can do these things, and then you start saying, well, they have this in the confront the Tolvir, they have some DPS, they have the minion that the deals one damage, summons a thing, does a thing, and you start thinking, well, if they're gonna play confront the Tolvir next turn, maybe I shouldn't do this and maybe I shouldn't do that. Like, and then you're kind of starting to think, well, I'm playing not to lose versus I'm playing to win. The winning play is probably playing that extra minion, playing those extra cards, or doing whatever you initially would plan to do against that deck, right? So it's when you start losing, when you start getting those things in your head, that's just like, I don't know. Like last time I saw this, the last three times I've saw this, I got out there and then they played the egg and they got the things and all that. And it's understanding that you know this coming. You know that if they get all their eggs hatched and they have 4 20/20s and you're playing something that punches face. And I have aggro on the brain right now because I've been playing a lot of aggro, but I've also been playing a lot of Blood, and Holy, which is a super fun deck. I'm probably going to talk about that soon. But you are always like, it's always in your mind. It's just like, oh, I've seen the last three times I've seen Warlock. They've played the eggs and they have the 20/20 and the 20/20 and the 20/20. And then I actually managed to clear one of them. And then they played Umbra and I was like, whatever. So you start thinking about, well, how do I deal with that? And maybe that's not your deck cannot deal with that. Like you are playing a deck that I have, maybe I can answer one, but I have no answer for Umbra, right? So instead of holding things back and letting your opponent have the time to get to that, you do what your game plan is against that deck, and you try to win the game. It may be that I'm going to pressure them so hard that they don't have time to do certain things, or maybe it could be, I mean, it's a limited subset of things, right? But it could be whatever your game plan is, stick with it and adjust as you go, but do it with the attitude of I am trying to win this game and not that I am trying not to lose. Because that really, I think, makes that'll get you percentage points. It will. And there are times where I have played games and you have played games where you're like, there's no way I'm winning this game. But you're like, all right, well, I've accepted the fact that there's no way I'm winning this game. So I had a game like this yesterday, and I was playing Death Knight, the Blood and Holy Death Knight versus a shaman, and the shaman had board after board, and I cleared them with the tools that I had, but I really started to run out of resources, and they had a gigantic allocator down and whatnot. And I'm like, well, all right, I lost this game probably, but I also believe in not conceding until you know you have zero outs, unless you're playing against a control priest or a control something that you don't want to be there for half an hour. Your time is valuable. You make those decisions on your own. But if you're playing a match like I was, I wasn't dead, but I was as good as dead. But I stuck it through and I said, all right, well, I'm not going to try to not lose this game. Well, obviously, you want to not lose the game. You can't like ignore the threats and just get punched in the face, right? But I made plays with the anticipation of trying to win the game, force them to deal with what I had and clear their board and get my minions out there and see what I got from. And then I think in that particular case, it was like see what other dragons I got from Deathwing and whatnot, and it ended up being fairly good, and it was a very exciting win, and it was just all about not playing to lose, and there were things I could have made other plays that would be like, well, the best I can do is try to not lose here, and I know I'm kind of repeating myself a little bit, and this also goes into like just general attitude and tilt and whatnot. Because when you're tilted, you start playing not to lose, right? You start playing. You're like, of course they have this card. I bet you they have the card that I bet you they have the perfect answer. And then when you start playing something like a priest or a rogue that generates things and they generate the answer, hint. You don't remember all the times you beat those guys when they couldn't generate what they needed to. But you remember almost every time when it's like, "Oh, I had this game won," and then they generated. I had a game the other day where I was confident that I won. I knew I was doing all the right things, and this is kind of the one I think that got me to think about this topic. Um, I was playing. I don't even remember what I was playing. I believe I was playing. Triple Unholy, right? And I've been playing a lot of Death Knight, it's fun. But I was playing, I think, Triple Unholy, and I had cleared this stuff, and everything was good. And then they played a Great Dracorax that they had gotten off of a dark gift, and that dark gift was lifesteal. And so they basically had I went from winning the game to having a Reno effect against me, and it was like, are you kidding me? What is with this? I should have won that game. And then you start to think, you're like, well, what do they have that's going to beat me here? And those are good thoughts to have, but what are the odds that they have them? You can't just kind of like, well, how many cards they have left in their deck? Is it likely they have things? You got to think about those kind of things. What do they have in the mulligan? What do they keep? What do they whatever? But you can't play so conservatively because you're afraid of what they're going to do to you. Try to win, focus on winning, stick to your game plan. Again, that game plan can differ versus your opponent, but stick to the game plan to win. And if you have to make adjustments because, hey, this is the situation now, I generated this card, they generated this, they're playing this, I have gone from the beat down to the getting beat, and I need to kind of shift my focus to survival. I'm not saying don't play to survive. That is the biggest thing right there. You play to survive, but don't do it in a way that doesn't stick to your game plan. So I'm going to keep it a little short this week. I not a lot of news, and I just wanted to. I'm going to start probably putting games back on here. I used to play games on this particular show, and I'm probably gonna start doing it again. I know a lot of our sight impaired friends that listen to the show like that, and it was definitely a challenging thing. It's fun to kind of talk through your plays, really kind of rubber duck the game in some ways where you're like, these are the cards I have available. This is the man I have. This is what my opponent has. This is my thought process. I can do this because the next turn I can do this, and oh, I can't do that anymore. And how do I do it? And it's kind of enjoyable. So I'm probably going to start picking that back up again on these slow weeks. Um, Shout out to Blister Guy, who is the first to have done it and the one that's always going to do it best. Fantastic Druid main. Definitely check him out on the Walk to Work podcast, a very very successful podcast. But that's it. Like, just try to win. Keep in mind that when you lose some games, it's variance, it's going to happen, and you're going to start losing more if you decide to just try to play not to lose. Seems simple, but it's something that can get away from you real fast. Thanks for listening. I'll talk to you next week.